As artificial intelligence rapidly reshapes the workplace, organizations are facing a new challenge: how to prioritize and develop the uniquely human capacities that machines can't replicate.
I'm Micah Scalen.
And I'm Noah Scalen.
We are business partners, siblings, and we've spent the past decade helping leaders build the creative capacity they need to thrive. Now we've gathered experts at the intersection of art and science to explore this rapidly changing landscape.
It's time to unlock the full potential of human creativity as a strategic advantage in the age of AI. Welcome to the ROI of creativity. Today, we are joined by our special guest, Anne Jacoby. Anne is the founder of Spring Street, where she partners with leaders who crave more connection and innovation across their teams. She leverages her early career experience as a performer, her MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business, and 20 plus years in corporate life to spark creativity in teams to find more joy and drive business results. Anne is an advocate for early arts education and served on the board of her alma mater, the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. And she wrote the Amazon #1 best-selling book, Born to Create: How Creativity Sparks Connection, Innovation, and Belonging in Our New World of Work. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. It is so good to be here.
So, your book, which is fantastic, really resonated with me and Micah because there's a lot of overlap in our lives and in our work. And it's one of those things that's really surprising because it's like, you know, you have this experience of life. You don't know if anybody else does. And then here you are talking about your own creative background and how it led to your work in the professional environment. So I'd like you to tell us, in your words briefly, about how you made that connection. So you went from theater and theater school to this corporate world of consulting.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. I love the overlaps too, Noah and Micah. I mean, we've had several conversations over the years about, gosh, all paths lead to this creative energy, right? And what we're doing with clients is so exciting. My path to this business world was unconventional, probably like yours. Grew up in the theater, singer, actor, dancer, thought I would make a career of it, and then found myself in New York and wanted some more stability. And so I thought, well, of course, I'll join a startup because that's got to be more stable than the arts, right?
Good choice.
Little did I know, startups are not typically that stable. But I ended up staying there for 12 years. And that was really that aha moment that we talk about, where all of a sudden I'm building a business with others. At the time, it was very small, 7 people. And I thought, oh my gosh, you've got to be creative when you're building a business, right? There's so much that transfers to the business world in terms of collaboration and listening and knowing your audience and having the discipline. All those skills apply in the business world. We just don't talk about it in that way. And so that was kind of my unconventional path. And then I realized that it can be a superpower, that it is a skill like any other skill that can be cultivated and practiced. And I love how you talk about practicing creativity. So here we are, 20 years later, here we are.
And so specifically, you had this theater background. And so can you talk about mapping some of that more directly, like onto this work? What specific skills can you dive into a little bit around that?
Yeah. I mean, I think everything from knowing how to collaborate with different people, different perspectives. I mean, theater is all about kind of connecting with an audience, feeling that energy. Obviously, there's a lot of discipline applied in the theater world of practicing and rehearsing and ensuring that everyone's playing their part really well, whether that's on the stage or off the stage. It's a production. And in business, similarly, we're putting on a production of sorts. We're understanding our customers and clients. We're listening to them and understanding the energy. We're staying adaptable as the business needs change or as economics change around us. So that ability to really be present, right? We talk so much about the importance of being fully present and listening. All of that translates to the business world as well. And so I just love making those tiny little leaps and understanding how beneficial it is. Also, it feels good, right? It's fun to be part of a cast or a company. And I think that translates really well to cultivating a thriving culture.
Like, it's so brilliant. Like, if you have a startup, hire actors. Like, they know how to, like, that level of like uncertainty is not they know something will manifest in 6 weeks. They trust, they have a process. So I love the idea that like an actor is particularly well suited to a startup context.
Putting things on and improvising, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I also went to theater school, but not for acting, it's for the technical side. But I always say it's the most useful set of skills because I know how to make things out of nothing with very little budget quickly, be on time, deliver on a deadline, react to a real audience. I mean, all this stuff is so practical. How did people respond in that environment when you made this leap and said, "Oh, I could bring these creative skills into this work environment"? How did people respond to that there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, so I went to business school at Stern, and I think that was where it was like, oh my gosh, other people have not had these experiences. And it's kind of you take for granted. I'm sure that you can relate to this. You kind of think that everyone has had to be in these situations of present to a room at a moment's notice and, just skills that we kind of understand is just part of the game. Other folks did not have those experiences. And so all of a sudden, I'm in this environment where, oh my gosh, it is a superpower. And yet everyone has the capacity, I think, to be creative. And that was really the impetus for the book is how do we demystify this creative skill and give access for all? Everyone has the capacity to practice this skill and it's going to help us in the future of work. So I think that was a big surprise, I guess, in the business world. And how people responded to it was like, oh, you've got this skill that other people don't have. It's differentiating.
Yeah. And they were receptive to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I think the word creativity is still off-putting to some people. It still has this connotation of chaos or that you're going to be magically, struck by lightning and then you're creative when we know that's not true. And we know that sometimes you just wake up not feeling terribly creative and you still got to put in the work. And so I think that's what we learn from the arts is that discipline and that ability to show up for ourselves and for others, even when we're not in the mood to be creative, and how much of a discipline it really is. So.
Yeah. I like how you mentioned that word creative can be off-putting or confusing, right? How do you then define that for people when you bring your work to them? How do you sort of help them leap over that part?
Yeah. I mean, I think most businesses want to innovate and they understand how important it is to continuously improve and evolve their offering, a service, a product, a way of working together. There's that shared understanding that needs to be brought into the workplace. And so if we can frame it under the umbrella of innovation, and to access innovation, we've got to be creative thinkers and doers. That seems to be a really good entry point that I've found. Others love the word creativity and there's no problem. But if I'm sensing resistance, that can usually get us over the hump.
Yeah. You're speaking our language.
Absolutely. I love that you used evolve as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I talk a lot about that in the context of culture too, because I think people think culture is something that's sitting on a shelf and we need to protect it and it's sitting over there. When in reality, it's this ever-changing feeling, a way of working together, a way of showing up for each other that needs attention and intention to really thrive. And as people enter the organization, leave the organization, that culture is going to ebb and flow and evolve. And that's a good thing. We want it to evolve. We don't want everything to stay static. That'd probably be a terrible, terrible thing. And so I think that's a good way to reframe culture work that I do with clients as well, is it's an evolution and we need to be intentional about it.
So you mentioned your book, right? So you've been doing this work already in corporate environments. You've figured out that there's this connection, that your skills are valuable. Why make a book? What was the specific inspiration to make that leap?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was after being in the field, if you were, for so long in the business world, running a P&L, building teams, and then recognizing these patterns of really effective creative thinkers and doers, whether that's from the arts, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders in Fortune 500 companies, we have real learnings from all of those different walks of life, those creative experts. And so I wanted to make sure that those stories were being told and that people had access to them. And then, going back to that word demystify, just wanted to break it down and make it feel doable in a way that is process oriented, because we know there are benefits to process, right? I want to make sure that my pilot has a checklist every time he or she is flying the plane, right? In the emergency room, right? There's a process. There are some disciplines that are really best suited for a repeatable process. And I think creativity, we want to break out of that status quo. We want to continuously evolve and try new things, but we also want to lean on processes that we know work. So I wanted to blend those two principles and hopefully share that with the world.
Excellent. Well, the way you did it was to structure it like a play.
Mm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I always kind of knew that structuring it in 3 acts would make sense, because I really do view it as, you've got your individual creativity, you've got your creative leadership skills, and then you can bring it into the organization, kind of organizational creativity. So the 3 act structure made sense to me. The whole idea of integrating scenes was actually kind of a late stage idea where I just thought, I want to bring this to life. I want people to kind of hear it in the conversations, so it doesn't feel so academic or sterile, but that we could actually hear and start to listen for ways to lean into creativity. So hopefully that translated into, bringing it to life through scenes.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think it's very applicable, which is great. It's an actionable book. It's not just sort of a thought exercise. But I have to ask you, what the heck is a zebra corn?
Exactly. Well, we are combinations of all sorts of things. So we don't want to be one note.
So folks that read the book are going to have a better understanding of what that might be.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the leaders that you work with. What's a blind spot that you think they have about creativity?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we pointed out some of them about it feeling chaotic. I also think it's really vulnerable to be creative. I mean, we just did this creative exercise for 5 minutes, and, as Micah said, we're kind of sweating about it, right? It's vulnerable to create something in the moment, to have that pressure put on us. Not all of us are okay feeling creative, especially if our teams don't feel safe and we're worried about being criticized or ridiculed or laughed at, but I think, a blind spot is really around this process to creativity, that people think, oh, of course we're going to be creative, or we'll just be creative during our hackathon, where in reality, we all have opportunities to be creative in our daily work with intention. And so, my hope is that with my book and other great books out there, we can start to develop almost a playbook for ourselves as leaders, as folks who believe in the benefits, and there are many, to creativity in the workplace, and can start to incorporate this really as a method of leadership.
And you mentioned that emotional component. Can you speak to a little more about that? Like, how do you create a place that maybe people feel, that they have that emotional safety to do this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so foundational. I would expect you would agree that without that safety, it's kind of pointless to try to get people to be more creative, because it's false, it's artificial. They're trying to show off in certain ways, and they're not really bringing their authentic creative selves to the workplace. So I always recommend really starting there. Start with those moments of vulnerability, making it okay to fail. And I think it's that kind of putting yourself out there, risking potential failure or learning, and really telling those stories with the team so that they see, if my leader can mess up and survive it, this is what it looks like, and this is what's expected of me, so that it's not just a story in the corner, that it's really encouraged and rewarded when people flex those creative muscles. Not always easy.
Very true.
Yeah.
A little slight change in direction, but like, do you have an example of something that we can do or that you've seen done that was really effective in that way? Because it is so hard. We hear it over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think storytelling, back to sharing stories of vulnerability, stories of, tried this it didn't work. I'm going to try it again. This is what I learned from it. I think that is a really great tool for any leader to get comfortable doing. I think little things like dedicating time in the meeting to hear what's not working or have people really challenge an idea from the leader. I mean, those moments of inviting feedback and feedback is an interesting thread if I can expand on that. Um, in showbiz, in putting on a play, we have this process of giving each other notes, right? We do a run through. The everyone sits in the house seats. The director, stage manager, maybe sit on the apron of the stage, and they've got notes and notes and notes and notes, right? Tons of notes, sometimes line by line, scene by scene of this is what you could do differently. This is what didn't land. This is what worked really well. Keep doing that, right? It's like these little notes, and it's very public. And everyone at some point gets criticized and has to take the note. And it's just a common practice. It is a ritual. It is a common practice. Everyone adopts it and everyone accepts it for the most part, right? Unless you've got a really big ego. So, having that modeled to me as a young performer and seeing these actors who had made 30, 40 years careers of acting, taking that note and accepting it and really moving through it was amazing modeling for taking feedback and incorporating it. And all of a sudden, you make the leap to the business world, and it is so sensitive and hyper emotionally charged, and we resist the receiving and incorporating feedback because we personalize it. It feels like a personal attack. And so, I think that for a leader to hold the space for feedback, and I'm not suggesting that we criticize people in public, for goodness sakes, but I think normalizing the process of what could we do better? Let's talk about it. Give me feedback as a leader because I want to continue to improve. That is really powerful as a muscle and a way to access creativity because we're all continuously improving, hopefully, and want to improve. And so the more we can normalize and ritualize that taking the note, if you will, I think is really powerful.
And I think always distinguishing critique and feedback from criticism, right? Because
Yeah.
I do think we just think of it for many people as criticism. And certainly nobody wants just a bunch of people piling on them. It doesn't feel good at all. But where it's a formulaic thing that's regular and understood what it is. And I love that we can take these tools from other areas, from the arts, and bring them in to business and show, here's how this works, that this really creates possibilities rather than just is destructive in some way.
Yeah. It takes a vulnerability too, to be open to that kind of input.
Yeah. From a leadership standpoint, I think that's right. That's really the point, is that it's very easy to tell other people what to do, but you're talking about showing people, right, what it looks like.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a totally different note, because I could talk about theater for a long time with you. I would love to dig in. I'd love to sing some show tunes with you. I'd love to do a little Annie. I'd love to do a little Fiddler. We could go through all the parts you've played, whatnot, all the amazing backstage stories, which is so romantic. But something has really dramatically changed since you wrote the book In Workplaces, which is this introduction or obsession or encouraged integration of Gen AI technology, the elephant in the room, right? How has this changed your thinking about creativity in the workplace, if it has, or if it has changed how you speak to your clients about it? Very curious to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I was listening to some other thought leaders, talking about AI in the workplace. And, tech and humans have been doing this dance for a while now, right? This isn't new. I remember back to my Axiom days, and we were talking about predictive analytics and, tech transformation. This has been around for a while. This is just kind of the next evolution of it, I think. And I think it always helps to think about what is the business problem that we're solving here. Because I think there is this appetite, and it's kind of seductive, right? This tool is going to totally transform my work, and I'm not going to have to think anymore. I'll get to that. But I do think it requires thinking about the end in mind, thinking about what are we really solving for, and then what is the best way to solve that problem. Is it technology? Is it humans? Is it a combination? And our human creativity still needs to champion and change and rally the troops. And, we still need to be involved in that tech transformation, whether it's Gen AI or another tool. So I think, starting with the problem, falling in love with that problem, and then picking the right AI tool to optimize for that solution. Um, the other thing that I think about when we're talking about creative thinking and doing is how our brains are responding to these tools. And David Brooks wrote a really great New York Times piece in July, and it's called, "Are We Really Willing to Become Dumber?" And I recommend that everyone check that out. It's a good, quick read. But he references this MIT study, which is not yet peer reviewed. It's a small sample size, so take it for what it's worth. But they studied 3 groups of people who wrote essays, and one group was just using their human brains. The second group used search engines, and the third group used Gen AI. And what they discovered was the folks who used the search engines and particularly Gen AI were much more homogeneous in nature, right? So it's this regression to the norm or regression to the mean. And then the human brains had a lot more variety, was kind of wider evidence-based sightings. So that's an interesting note. But what I find most fascinating is what they found our brains were doing in each of these groups. And probably not surprising, the brain activity in the Gen AI group was next to nothing. And in the human category, you have all these different ping pongs. The neural pathways are on fire. And that's, as we know, what leads to creative thinking is kind of the integration of these different pathways in our brain. And so as myself, as a mom, as a caring human being, I care about our brain health and continuing to flex these muscles. And I worry about brain atrophy, frankly. It's just kind of losing that creative spark, losing that ability to come up with our own ideas, and have that divergent thinking really well developed. So I say all of that to say I don't not use the tool. I do use the tool in very specific ways. And I think it's about being intentional. When do I want to use the tool? When am I consciously not using these tools so that I continue to develop this muscle that I know is so critical for brain health, and for our own creativity? So I don't know, I just said a lot there.
That was great. No, and I think you're saying tool, and I think that's how we tend to approach it, right? It's not that it's evil. It's not that it's, it's inherently bad in some way. It's a tool. And how do we use tools and whether those are appropriate? Like you said, I also like how you started off talking about the end and thinking of the goals. And it reminds me, again, going back to the theater, right? Which is that you're thinking about creating a production and you have an end goal in mind. And so then it's about putting the right pieces in place to create that vision in reality.
Yeah.
So I see that
Yeah.
direct correlation again from the sort of arts mind.
I was thinking about some of the work that I do with clients and some of the initiatives that we have in place that are intentionally creative initiatives across the enterprise. And after a few years, you start to just get into these patterns, these grooves, where it's kind of human nature. And all of a sudden you forget, well, why are we actually doing this initiative? And what is the core purpose of it? And what is the business impact? And I think it's those kinds of prompts and curiosity that we need to continue to circle back with, ensuring that we're aligned on what is that purpose, whether it's a production or an initiative at an organization. Let's anchor to that, and then the creativity will flow from there. But I think you do need that North Star with the work that you're doing.
I love thinking about it as like when you remember that it's a tool, you have to remember that it's a tool that was built for a certain reason. And it really made me think about a great conversation that I heard at a conference at Center for Humanities at CUNY. And it was really cool. It was like creatives who were really involved in experimenting with AI and Gen AI in like very interesting ways. And this one creative technology individual artist talked about how these consumer Gen AI tools are often to solve a problem because the discomfort of that essay writing or that writing, there's a lot of discomfort in writing for many people. And so they're very happy to be relieved of that discomfort and have this assist. And that is why these tools, the consumer facing sort of application of them is this way. But this person is I have to remember this person's name, but they were looking at how to educate other technologists to think a little differently about what this could do. They posed to artists and writers specifically, what would you like AI to do for you? And they actually had many things that they wanted AI to do for them, but it wasn't that. They actually had ideas that help them with the divergent thinking. So I was like, that's cool. This tool could be built differently and we might see different tools. But right now, like you said, to remember that these tools are about pushing you to the median right now and making that like discomfort with the creativity and getting the writing done go away. So you're not going to get something creative, but you will get something functional.
Yes. Isn't that so interesting? And I love the word that you use, discomfort, because I think that is so important for us to sit with as leaders, that there are going to be uncomfortable conversations, and just typing in, what should I say to this person? And then reading from a script is not going to get us there emotionally. It's not going to deliver the right message because it's not going to be coming from here. It's so important to sit with that discomfort. And yes, these tools can really help us in certain ways. And hopefully, as we get more adept at using them for the purpose that we intend, we can avoid that regression to the mean that we've been talking about and make it expansive. That's my hope. And be okay with discomfort because it's so human and we want to be human.
Yay, human.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So thoughtful and life affirming approach. The topic of this summit is the ROI of creativity, which we know is a little bit of a funny term, but you, being someone who's sort of been in many different worlds, are familiar with it. And I'd love to hear what your take on what is the ROI of creativity for you.
Yeah. This is such a powerful way to frame it, I think. And of course, not surprising. I've given it a lot of thought, and it is an investment. Let's be real. This takes time. It takes intention. It takes prioritizing certain things that some people might balk at, right? And that can feel uncomfortable. I see the return on investment in creativity as a more connected workforce. And what I mean by that is really integrating the thinking, the feeling, the doing, ensuring that people are safe, ensuring that people can be vulnerable and not suffer the consequences of getting things wrong. But I think that really does lead to better workplace cultures, better livelihoods, and a better bottom line for our businesses. So I do think it's a huge upside if you're willing to make that kind of investment. But it is an investment.
Practical.
What do you think? Yeah, I'm practical. Yeah. What do you think, Noah?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think we speak the same language, and I think we're very much interested in the reason why we use that ROI question is because that term, return on investment, isn't really brought up in the arts world. Did you encounter that before you went to business school? I certainly didn't encounter it until I was in the business world. But that's the mindset we're coming up against, right? And I think that's the point is you have to speak to people on their terms and using language they understand. Creativity can be daunting. It can be confusing. It can be mysterious. But as you said earlier, and something that we talk about all the time is that we know consistently that every organization that we've ever worked with has prioritized innovation. And it's a very easy way in to say, look, if that's really your priority, then guess what? There's this other thing that you're neglecting that has to be prioritized as well if you're going to really make this reality and not just give it lip service. And, I think leaders get that when they can understand it. And I think it's finding that way in so that they can put the pieces together and say, yes, okay, I've been maybe thinking about creativity in a different way, not wrong way, but just in a way that doesn't apply to what they do.
Yeah. I also think, as creative practitioners or however you would define us, what we do, right? We can also be helpful in metricizing this creative muscle. And I think that a lot of times people just kind of lean on, oh, what our employee engagement scores look like. But I think there are other ways of getting at, are we really driving new ideas, or are we really increasing the levels of safety that people feel as they work together? Are we creating more spaces for people to collaborate cross functionally? Like, those are things that you can count and measure. And because metrics can be really important, those, it's a good place to start, is really thinking about, well, how could we actually map this over time? And are we measuring the right things?
Highlighting one that like it is an investment, because people would ask that question, what's the ROI? And the a part of the response is like, well, what are you willing to invest? Of course, right? That will determine also what you get out of it. But that idea of metricizing, I love that, because right, if it is how are different people speaking in meetings? There's all kinds of things you can observe and record and see as a positive impact and contributing to the growth that you want to see. So I love that, not to not shy away from that. I think there's a fear
Yeah.
maybe that if you do that, you'll cramp the creativity, but done appropriately, right? It can be the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Constellation of metrics for sure.
I also like that you were talking about the sort of cross-function collaboration piece, because that's something we emphasize in our work around collaboration and how necessary it is for creativity. And yet people think of creativity often as a solo activity, and there isn't like an acknowledgement of that. How do you talk about collaboration in your work?
Yeah. I mean, I really do think in the workplace, creativity is often social. It is the relationships that we form. It is feeding off each other's energy. And it's really understanding lots of different perspectives. And, ideally, um, you know, having that perspective taking, the perspective of your customer, your client, the perspective of finance versus marketing, finding those different ways in to round out a problem and solution set, I think is a creative practice. And a lot of times we get myopic. We kind of see our lane, and it's really easy to kind of fight for our constituents versus zooming out and really seeing the bigger picture. And that's where you get the real expansive solutions. That's where you can apply your imagination and think bigger than just the sum of its parts. So I'm big into that too. Not surprising. Just finding ways to gather those different perspectives and building it into the creative process, I think, is very powerful.
And I actually see a comment that I want to pull up, which is we were talking about figuring out these metrics, and maybe you figured out some. They're asking about the creativity as an enabler of organizational resilience. Have you encountered something that can help people gauge that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how you define resilience, right? Are you kind of pushing through a lot of cuts? I certainly see that a lot with budget constraints, and how can we do more with less? How can we think creatively about doing things in a different way that doesn't involve so much expenditure or resources? So I think that if I'm understanding the comment appropriately, I think that could be a way in, is really thinking about a resilient organization going through tough times together, and then seeing creativity as the catalyst for positive change, for moving through that tough patch. But I love the comment and question.
Yeah, I would bet
Really cool.
probably there's a retention part of that as well, right? People get exhausted through organizational change. You're going to see a challenge there in keeping people there. And if they are feeling that their creativity is still being needed and used through this challenging time, they will often want to see it through, see what happens, right? See how their contribution makes an impact. But if they don't, they will probably peace out and go somewhere else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And burnout, risk of burnout. And, I know well-being levels are at all-time lows. So I really see creativity. Gosh, someone mentioned this creative sprint helps our team stay positive. How awesome is that, for team morale and really building and investing in those relationships? Because what else do we have? We spend so much time
Yeah.
at work. We want to enjoy each other and kind of push the limits of our own creativity. So you got to make space for that.
we would often tell our clients, because they're so focused on exactly that, like the ROI and the impact and the innovation initiatives, making sure that they were successful, and that it would be like an added bonus to be like, also it's going to make people feel better, like also it like boosts the mood, all this kind of stuff. But now, because of so much research, which we'll talk about, like it's a critical part of it. Now we know, right, that people's actual well-being is a critical part of the workplace. So I love that. And this is an opportunity to get involved with that for yourself, because Creative Sprint is all about forming habits that support creativity in a regular practice. So we have to ask you, what is one habit that you recommend cultivating? Maybe something you do or something you personally or that you recommend for others.
Well, I hate that you're limiting me to one habit.
You can do many. You can do many. Feel free.
No, I really, it's interesting. I think back to the earlier point about discipline and carving out time and space, even if we're not feeling it, right? That is so critical. So highly recommend. I'm wedded to my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't get done usually. So carving out that time, for me, it's dance, getting into the dance studio. It's a discipline, got to move my body and just feel the music. And it really does challenge my brain. There's lots of research around the benefits of learning choreography, kind of as anti-Alzheimer's methods. But for another client of mine, it's 30 minutes coloring in an adult coloring book, right? Star Wars, or just kind of using that as a way to shift perspectives. I think there are a lot of creative habits that we can adopt. And again, if it's ritualized, if it's something that you're sitting down with the instrument that you're learning, and for 30 minutes, you're going to plunk out this new song, that is really getting us into a different headspace. And it's so interesting to see the results of when you return to the work, or you return to the business problem, or you return to the parenting challenge, that all of a sudden you feel a little bit lighter. You can see things from a different angle. We've activated different parts of our brain that really do benefit us in lots of different areas in our life. So if I were to pick one creative practice, it would be that carving out time for yourself to express yourself and get out of that comfort zone and be present in a creative act that's different from your normal work mode.
I love that. I love that you distinguish it too as something other than what you're doing, because I think people often want it to be somehow directly correlative to what they do. Like, oh, I do this, so then if I do something specifically related to that that's creative, then somehow, this is the way to do it. But what you're describing is completely other, and yet it does impact work and how you problem solve.
Yeah.
Well, what is the best way for folks to connect with you and to also order your book? We've got some links that we'll provide below, so don't worry about it. How do you recommend people get in touch with you?
Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I'm also on Substack, jacoby.substack.com, or my website, which is springstreetco.com. But would love to hear you and keep in touch with all of you, because I think this is a community effort, that it takes a creative community to change the world. And we know that creativity changes the world. So this is the first step, this creative sprint.
Wonderful. Thanks for taking your time to be with us today and weathering the technology and playing is a delight. And we hope we'll find some other ways to work with you.
So fun. And I love all the comments. Thank you everyone for being here. What an awesome group. And I'm inspired.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening. This conversation was recorded live at the 2025 ROI of Creativity Summit. Check out the video version on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. ROI of Creativity is brought to you by Another Limited Rebellion and Preview Media. Executive producer, Nikki Frankel, producer, Gina Bouchard, social director, Stevan Vlaschke, and our editors are Jasmine Jackson and Gina Bouchard.
And until next time, remember, creativity is a practice.